Discover College Soccer podcast is sponsored by VIO. VIO is the #1 AI camera solution helping players capture college recruitment videos. Check out their new starter and family options by clicking on the link in the description or visit Discover College Soccer to learn more. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Discover College Soccer. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Coach Steven from Cortland up in New York. Welcome, Coach.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here. You guys, congrats. We're talking end of November, but a heck of a season. Made it all the way to the third round of the NCAA Division III men's soccer tournament. So congrats on that. Um, I
Thanks.
I know you wish it hadn't ended there, but I'm guessing you're turning your eyes to the class of 24 and hitting the recruiting trail hard at this point, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's actually, it's funny timing that, you kind of end your season on a weekend and then here comes Thanksgiving, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, let's build the next team. So
Well, and talk to me about that. I'm guessing, the timeline for men's Division III, as we've heard from a bunch of coaches. I'm sure it's similar for you. You're pretty much focused on the class of 24 right now, kind of 9 months ahead, right? Are you looking at any 25s? What is that calendar like for you? When you plan on closing the class, that sort of thing?
yeah, we're actually interesting. So I would say being a high level D3, you do get some kids that want to be organized and ahead of the curve. So it's funny, we kind of work on like a class and a half almost. The kids that want to be advanced and want to be organized, we'll work with them, and we don't want to delay their process. So we actually have one kid committed for 25 already. But most of our focus, like you said, is on 24s and then transfers. We're a big transfer school. We've kind of made our hay with that in the last 5 or 6 years. And obviously the explosion of the portal has, I don't know, helped in some regards. It's kind of a double-edged sword there. But so yeah, I would say right now we're probably just firming up the 24s. Going to watch kids one last time, doing an extra eval on them. Just trying to probably be done by the new year with 24s.
Wow. Okay. So you guys will be done that early. Okay. Well, you mentioned the portal. Like, I mean, are you are you mostly looking for at the portal, or do you have junior college kids that come in as well? Kind of what makes you say, you know what, yeah, I want to look at the portal versus, bring in a brand new freshman?
Yes, we've our kind of model, and not by design when it started, but just kind of by default now is like usually half of our class is transfers and half of them are true freshmen. And so, we have enough of those kind of flagship kids that are going to carry that 4 year process, and keep our culture going. And then we pair it and try and plug in some kids with maybe some holes that we need, in terms of level, to kind of keep our success going and be consistent. We don't
Okay.
get a lot of junior college transfers, for one reason or another. Being in New York, it's all Division III for the most part. There's a few Division I junior colleges, but it's mostly Division III. And then the level kind of has to match. I'm really hesitant on bringing in a junior that's not going to play. And so, one of my philosophies is, if you're going to go find your next school and you only have 2 years left, like, why would I bring you in just to sit on the bench? And it's not fair to the kid, and it's not what they're looking for. So we try and be really cautious with the junior college kids and make sure that it's a really perfect fit, and be pretty sure that they're going to be on the field for us. So for the most part, it's Division I transfers that want to maybe take a step down, went somewhere, weren't happy, weren't playing, whatever the reasons, and just kind of want to find that next new home.
Okay. Well, when you're looking for I guess we'll call it the traditional recruit, in terms of timing, what are some of the tournaments? I know this is at least on the girls' side, this upcoming weekend's massive with a GA event and the Raleigh event. And so on the guys' side, what are some of the main tournaments you like to go to local players?
Yeah, the Raleigh event's great. That one's kind of our marquee one once our season wraps up that we look to go to. There's a smaller one in New York, the Massapequa Showcase. It's on Long Island. Usually one of our assistants will go down to that. We get a lot of downstate kids, and so you tend to find a lot of kids that are, on Long Island teams and whatnot playing on that. And then that's really it for us until probably Jeff Cup. So right now, Jeff Cup tries to start for us at least, that next recruiting class. And then the last couple here, in the month of December, we try and finish up those 24s.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, you've in terms of building your roster, you talked a little bit about, the classes and whatnot, but what about size? Is there a roster size that you like to be at each year?
We fluctuate. I'd say actually coming out of COVID, we were really heavy. We had a ton of kids. So, and I'm sure a lot of coaches were in the same boat. We recruited a normal class and then kept all of our kids that could play an extra year. And so we actually grew up both ends. We ended up with like 44 kids. And so I met with my boss right after COVID, and just neither of us were real comfortable on just cutting down 15 kids, especially the ones that had jumped through the right hoops and done all the right things during COVID and did what they were asked. So we actually added kind of like a JV slate of games, a reserve team. So we did that for 2 years. It wasn't a long-term solution, but that was kind of our short-term, like, let's try and manage our roster size that way. It worked great. A few hiccups here and there, which were expected, but for the most part, it did the job that it needed to do. So we were happy with that. And then now this past fall was the first one without a slate of those games, and we were down to 34. Usually we're right around 30. If we go up to 34, that's manageable. That's no problem. But I think in the next couple of years, as those fifth year kids still see themselves out the door, we'll probably be a little bit heavier, like right around that 34 number.
Okay. Well, do you guys do your own ID camps, or do your staff work other camps? How do camps fit into your recruiting process?
We do. Yeah, we've got a big one here that we run and manage. It's called NYID. We get roughly 300 kids on a residential camp. We get like 30 to 40 other colleges, and it's kind of like take a big Division I model, ID camp, but it's for D3, and so it's usually like just all of the D3 coaches around the state come and work the camp, and it's great. So it's kids that, maybe want to reach towards us, and, Binghamton comes, and maybe some of those other smaller Division Is around the state, those mid-majors, and, they want to reach for us, they want to reach for them. But realistically, they find a good home with somebody that's at the camp. So it's been a good model. We started that probably in 2016, and that's been rocking ever since. So we use that quite a bit. I think each year, there's 3 or 4 kids that we're pretty intentional about wanting to come to camp, and we see them there, and we get to really have that kind of intimate experience with them and get to know them as a kid, and then eventually they commit. So I would say probably half of our true freshmen come from camp.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, whether it's camp or tournament or transfer or anything, kind of what makes up the hierarchy of things that you're looking for in a player, both on the field and off the field?
So I would say, one of my strengths and our program strength is culture. And so I think 2 things. One, I think we can take a chance on kids that are a really good player, because I know that in our culture, the right and wrong and how we do things are going to like develop kids into that. And so we're great at assimilating kids into our culture. I'm not one that sits here and says, you have to fit our culture first or we don't bring you in. I do think we do a great job, and we're so intentional about what we do in season and in the off season that we can help kids that maybe are a little bit rough around the edges, but are really good players. We can kind of transform kind of who they are a little bit as people. So that's number one. We got to look at, kids that just fit the level first. And then if it's kind of apples to apples and we're weighing kids out, and then we kind of do a much deeper dive and, who are they and what are they going to bring to the table and what does that look like? So.
Okay. Well, let's shift gears, talk a little bit about the school. You've got a unique perspective, I think, having been a player, coach, assistant coach, head coach. You've been there pretty much the last 15 years of your life. So
That's right.
I can't think of anybody better to ask. So tell us some things about Cortland, maybe some great things that we would know just by even going through the website.
Yeah. So I think it's a perfect size school for kids that, don't want a small school, don't want a big one. We're kind of right in the middle. It's big enough where you're going to meet new people every day, small enough where you're going to see the same kids walk into class once in a while. And there's that familiarity. So I think just campus culture, campus community is really great. We're a small town in upstate New York. And so, it's very college driven. It's definitely a college town. Bars, restaurants, things like that. There's a lot to do in town. It's a really fun school. That's one of the things that we have to try and turn kids away from a little bit on the soccer side of things, especially in season. It's a really fun school. But that being said, in the off season and when they do have time, it's a really fun place to go to school. It's a great little college community. We're a big athletic department for Division III. We've got 25 sports, a ton of success. And so, I think we've got somewhere around like 800 varsity athletes here on campus. So it's about a tenth, maybe a little bit more than a tenth of the population. And there's a ton of success spread around. And I think that's one of our strengths, not just on men's soccer, but in general. Kids that come here, you're surrounded by like-minded kind of type A kids that are really successful and going after it, no matter what sport they're in. For example, like our fall, we had, men's soccer, women's soccer, volleyball, field hockey, and football. All 5 of our team sports were first in their league, won the conference tournament, went to the NCAA tournament. So there's just a lot of success and it's fun. I always tell kids, like in the recruiting process, what's your mood like when you lose a game, right? Like on the drive home, they're like, oh, it sucks, it's miserable. I'm like, yeah, like you don't have that a lot here with, yourself, but all your other colleagues that are your peers that are playing college sports. It's winning is fun. And so there's a really fun environment around our athletic department. It's really competitive. Kids really go after it. And so that's a good thing. What else about Cortland? I think we've got a few marquee majors that set kids up just as well as some big universities. Kind of some of those rankings and the internships and kind of some of those profiles of those programs really set kids up great. We're kind of lucky because I think we have a lot of majors that guys want in the recruiting process. And I can't speak to the girls recruiting process much, but I know that, guys, we have the, exercise science, and we have the business, and we have sports management, and we have, kind of all of those. And so those tend to be some hot topics for kids coming out. And then in general, I just think, I think the best stat to use is that there's a lot of kids that transfer in and there's almost no kids that transfer out. And so that to me tells me that, the school is doing right by the kids. The school is doing a really good job. Our athletics department, just as a whole, we have very, very few kids transfer, if any, per year, transfer out. And so for the most part, that kind of lets me know that stat is people are doing right by kids and people are doing it the right way. And, it's a good place to be. It's a place that kids don't want to leave. And so we can kind of hang our hat on that and take some pride in that too.
Awesome. Well, people see Cortland, but then it's SUNY Cortland, right? You got the State University of New York moniker there. So
Yep.
what are some of the benefits? Because I know that's a very large state system of colleges. What are some of the benefits of being part of that? Is it cheaper for folks than maybe one of those traditional Northeastern Division IIIs and that sort of thing? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, much cheaper, much cheaper. And actually, like a lot of our out-of-state prices now are really great. Like we can beat most private schools even with our out-of-state packages now in terms of what kids are getting. So our roster, and I don't know what's changed in terms of our department here with admissions and financial aid, but I know that they're packaging out-of-state kids really well. Our roster has gotten much more regional, if not national, since COVID. And so, kids, I think kids look at the rankings, and that helps. That certainly helps. So on the soccer thing, they look, oh, top 10, and, they email everybody that's in the top 20, right? Like those type of kids. So that's number one. We're attractive because of that. But I think also, when it comes down to it, their price, we've had kids decide to come here, even if they're out of state, because their price tag is cheaper and they're weighing, kind of those apples to apples. And, all things considered, if your price is $5-6 grand lower, then that might be the tipping point. So price tag here is really, I would say, very affordable for a Northeast Division III school for sure.
Okay. Well, on the academic side, sometimes it's hard for kids to balance, the demands of their sport, especially a top program like you guys, and going an extra month kind of, and so how do your athletes really balance the demands of the classroom and the soccer field, and what kind of support systems does a school offer to really help them succeed in both?
Yeah. So there's kind of two pathways. So the school has, really kind of intricate academic support just for all students. And I think they do a good job in general. But then on just the athlete side, we've got a full-time guy who just works with athletes as kind of like their academic coordinator. So anybody that's, got some red flags, or anybody that even just wants help, wants to be better than, even if they have a 3.5 and they want a 3.8, right? Like those type of kids. There's someone that's kind of full-time dedicated to those athletes. And they're kind of a liaison between the athlete and upper campus and that tutoring center, and getting them the help that they need. And then also on our team, we're very much a micromanaging staff when you're young, until you've proven that you can do it on your own. And so, kids will have 3 to 4 study halls per week, and check in and make sure that they're doing their work. And they've got individual meetings, especially our freshmen, once a week. Show us all your grades, show us your book. What do you got? What's your schedule look like? When are you studying? So we micromanage, I would say, more than most for our younger kids, until they really kind of prove that they've got the tools to do it. And the goal is for them not to need that, right? And so, I tell them in the recruiting process that, your goal when you come here is to prove to us as a staff that you don't need us, right, academically. And that should be your first mission here, right? Is what's your schedule look like? And like, you got to be on point with all this stuff. And if you can do that really consistently throughout your first semester, then we'll kind of let you go, right? And we'll let you have a lot more freedom with your own time. And then if you ever hit some bumps in the road, we'll rein it back in, and we'll get you back in here and get you the help that you need. So we do get, we're not a NESCAC, and so not all of our kids are super type A driven academic kids. And so most of the time we'll get a few kids that do need that help and need that support and benefit from it. But for the most part, we do get a lot of good kids too that prove us wrong and say, thanks for helping us jump through those hoops, and we don't need you anymore. And they just off they go and they do it themselves.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's imagine we're kind of in the middle of the conference schedule back in October. Kind of walk me through what a typical week looks like for a player in terms of winter practices, classes, meals, games, all that kind of stuff. What's a normal week look like for them?
Yeah, so conference for us, Wednesday, Saturday schedule. So games are then. Sundays are days off. And so Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, during the week, are study halls for kids in the evening. We practice from 2 to 4 in the afternoon. So most of our kids will wake up, kind of get like an early morning lift in on like a Monday or Tuesday early in the week, go to class, get some lunch, get ready, go out to training. And then that's when kind of schedules diverge a little bit. Kids can take night classes. Anybody that missed lifts, there's open hours in the afternoon that they can go get after training. And then they've got study halls in those evenings, that are younger kids. Games are on Wednesdays. So they'll just go to class up until, locker room time on game day. Game day again on Saturday. If we're traveling, most of our conference is pretty tight. And so, furthest that we go, I think our very furthest, like 5 hours, that'll be an overnight trip. But for the most part, they're like 2 to 3 hour trips, pretty easy day trips. And then Sunday we'll have an extra study hall for kids that either had like a night class and had to miss one, or it's kind of like an opt-in study hall on Sundays on their day off.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the team and the soccer side of things. I mean, we already talked about your roster size, and you've mentioned your staff a couple times. So talk to me a little bit more about your staff. How many do you have? What role does everybody play? Are there other kind of support staff that the athletic department has that work specifically with your team, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So we'll kind of start. Our first assistant, he's full-time, so he's in the office with me every day. And he's also kind of like our camps director. So it's kind of his role. Mostly he does freshman recruiting or that kind of normal recruiting process. He does video breakdown. And then, yeah, like once season's done, kind of shifts into camp, kind of halftime, and make sure that we're trying to attract kids to that. He manages like all of our incoming emails, and kind of like sifts through those of kids that we need to go see and what's that schedule look like. So he kind of manages all of that. Our second assistant, this is his second year. I think he'll probably move on after this year. He'll be done with his master's. A lot of video breakdown, a lot of individual coaching. He'll go out and like do a lot of one-on-ones with guys, things, guys that want to clean up some parts technically. He's kind of like very much like an on-field coach from an individual standpoint, and does a lot of video with guys. He'll also take care of a lot of the travel, meals, things like that. We've got a goalkeeper coach. So he works with both our men's and women's programs here at the school. Our women's team trains in the morning from 8 to 10. So he's out there with them from 8 to 10. Then he comes in here into the office, kind of has like a midday shift of work in the office, whatever needs to get done. And then he's out with us on the field 2 to 4 with our goalkeepers. We've got a volunteer assistant, student assistant that just helps with anything that comes up. Equipment, things that just pop up. He's usually the guy that's having guys check into study hall and kind of managing study halls and does a lot of that. And then again, I'd say the other one that's like probably pretty integral within our program that our guys know intimately is the academic coordinator. And that's not someone that's full-time with all of our guys, but that's more of a when they need it, or when we say, hey, we've got a really busy week. Why don't you just go see him, make sure everything looks good, or, make sure you're all set for upcoming tests. So he's kind of like a pop in, pop out in both semesters for our guys. But I would say 75% of our guys use him pretty consistently throughout the year.
Okay, awesome. Well, now I got to ask about you. Okay. How would you describe kind of your style of coaching and then the style of play you're trying to implement there?
I'm a pragmatic coach, so I'm not in love with a style, which I think probably fits college soccer better than it does any other brand of soccer. Basically, like, our style is we just take all the best players we can get, and then in August we figure out, who's who and what's that look like and how are we going to win games with the group that we have. And so each year, we may play a different formation, we may play a different style. So I would say very pragmatic, just in our approach of, what is going to work and what's not, and here's why we're going to do things, and kind of troubleshooting on the fly. I'm huge into like the culture and just like the team chemistry, body language, all of that. I would say if I'm going to like have a real eye for anything, it's that kind of nuance of a team, just that social dynamic, making sure our younger players are welcomed and integrated and feel like they have a role. I don't want anybody to show up to training and feel like, what's the point? I think that's just, it's not good for the kid. It's not good for the team. If that's the case, then I think we as a staff have to look at it and say, well, why is he here? Right? Like, why did we recruit that player if they're showing up every day and they feel like, what's the point? What's my role? So I'm really big on that, just that kind of culture and nuance of a team, making sure that everybody feels like they play a pretty integral part, whether they're on the field or not. I would say I definitely default towards pushing hard in the early parts of the season and then really backing off and kind of defaulting more towards rest and recovery in the later parts of the season. College soccer is a grind. There's just too many games and not enough time. And so my background is in exercise science. And so I think that's pretty useful in terms of trying to manage teams and mitigating injuries and making sure guys are restful and ready to go on game day. We do a lot of, I'd say, like self-answering type of apps and questions of, fatigue and stress and soreness and sleep and all that type of stuff. So we look at that type of stuff daily, from just a mental standpoint and a physical standpoint, and, making sure that we have, I guess, a product on the field that's ready to play. So I'm very mindful of that. I would say our style of play is competitive. So while I'm pragmatic, I'm also like, I'm not overly emotional at all. I'm pretty like cut and dry, and you can ask my wife that too. It's probably her biggest critique of me. But very much like, I don't know, if you're not playing as well as the other kid, like that kid's in, like there's no favorites, there's no nothing. And so training gets really competitive. We'll freeze it on the spot and say, you switch pennies, you're not playing well today, and so guys, I think they come to training ready to compete. And it does two things. It keeps our top guys sharp. You can't really have an off day. And then it keeps our bottom guys, I think, eager because they know there's actually a pathway into the starting 11. Our starting 11 changes quite often. There's probably the few 4 to 5 staple guys, marquee guys that don't ever leave it. And then the rest of it's kind of a revolving door of, who's in good form. And so I think that helps us later on during the year. I would say we're a pretty deep team. We can sub, 16, 17, 18 guys deep and still keep the same level. So I think that comes from our training of just, not really having favorites and not thinking that one player is better than another just because of their name. It's just pretty cut and dry, not a lot of emotion, a pretty pragmatic approach to it. But I think it keeps guys hungry, and it keeps our younger guys hopeful that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Awesome. Well, Coach, I appreciate the time. I like to end these with one last question, and that's if you had one piece of advice, one nugget of info that you would hope that every parent, player, family going through this college recruiting process knew, what would that be?
I'd say for boys coming out, I would say ego is the enemy. Especially now with you got fifth year kids and you got the transfer portal and you got a lot going on, you're not just competing against kids your age anymore. And so what you think is a good fit in your dream school, and I want to be careful. I don't want to just burst everybody's balloons. But I think taking a realistic approach and trying to drop the ego out of the recruiting process helps boys more than it does, hurt. So, when they go through, I think they have to realize that, the school that they want to play at, they probably can't play at. Right. And so when you're a freshman and sophomore, especially 14, 15-year-old as a boy, you have to think, whatever that school is that you're thinking of, Wake Forest, right? Like I wanted to play at UNC and that never happened. But you have to like get ready to come down to reality quicker than the kids around you, because that's going to be when you find your magic and you find your home. And the longer it takes you to come down to reality, the later in the process you start with other schools, and maybe now it's too late, right? And you end up kind of missing out on opportunities because you're still head in the clouds and other kids came down to reality a little bit quicker and started to make those connections, started to talk to those coaches. For us, it's that like D1, D3 thing. Most of the kids that want to go Division I and think that they're a Division I player at 15 are probably going to end up being a good fit for us, right? The ones that are right on that crux of, could I go there and sit on a bench for 4 years, or could I come here and play and have a really good career? But the kids that figure that out the quickest are the ones that, respond to emails from us, come and take visits, come and actually give it a chance. And then they realize, wow, this is actually a great fit. So I would say for boys, get your head out of the clouds earlier than your friends and your peers. And that usually will head you onto the right timeline.
Awesome. Well, Coach, really appreciate the time. Wish you the best of luck here, closing out your recruiting class, and hopefully you'll get back to that tournament next year.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's Matt from Discover College Soccer. I hope you're enjoying the podcast, whether that's on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I also wanted to let you know about the Discover College Soccer Study Table. This is our brand new online portal that is complete with a 14-part online course giving you all of the ins and outs of the college soccer recruiting process. There's also a wealth of resources such as checklists, templates. There's the spreadsheets that have every soccer program in the country along with their coaches, their contact information, their social media information, some basic stats about the school, and more. Plus, there's an online community where you can ask your questions, share your wins, your losses, any questions that you may have around the college soccer recruiting process. It's all there at the Discover College Soccer Study Table that you can find at discovercollegesoccer.com/study table, and hopefully we will see you there.